In 1976, a man owned 10% of Apple. Not 10% of a small startup, 10% of what would become the most valuable company in human history. He sold it for $800. Today, that stake would be worth over $400 billion. And the man who sold it is still alive, living in a small house in Nevada, collecting stamps. My name is Ryan Cole, and this is Accidental Billions. Let's talk about Ron Wayne. Most people know two names when they think of Apple: Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak. But almost nobody talks about the third co-founder, the man who was there at the very beginning, who signed the original Apple partnership agreement, who designed Apple's very first logo, who wrote Apple's first company manual. His name was Ron Wayne, and in 1976 he was 41 years old, while Jobs was 21 and Wozniak was 25. Ron was the adult in the room, the experienced one. He had already started his own company before, a slot machine manufacturing business that failed. And that failure left Ron with something Jobs and Wozniak didn't have: fear. It was 1976 in a garage in Los Altos, California. Steve Jobs had a vision. He wanted to build and sell personal computers. Wozniak had already built the Apple I computer. It actually worked. Jobs wanted to sell it. But he needed one more thing: money. Jobs approached a local electronics dealer called Byte Shop. The owner said he would buy 50 computers at $500 each. That was $25,000 worth of orders. Incredible for 1976. But there was a problem. To build 50 computers, they needed parts and materials up front, which meant they needed credit, which meant they needed someone older and more established to co-sign. That person was Ron Wayne. So Jobs offered him a deal. Come on board as a partner. Help us get the credit we need, and we'll give you 10% of Apple. Ron said yes. On April 1st, 1976, the Apple Computer Company was officially founded. 3 partners: Jobs, 45%, Wozniak, 45%, Ron Wayne, 10%. Ron Wayne was in. He was a co-founder of Apple. He had 10% of the company, and for 12 days, everything was fine. Then Ron started thinking. He had been through a failed business before. He knew what debt felt like. He knew what it felt like to watch something collapse, and he started doing the math in his head. Jobs was talking about borrowing money, taking on debt to buy parts. If Apple failed, as a partner, Ron would be personally liable. His personal assets, his savings, everything. And Ron looked at 21-year-old Steve Jobs. Brilliant, charismatic, but unpredictable, aggressive, difficult, hard to control. Ron had seen enough in life to be cautious. So just 12 days after founding Apple Computer Company, Ron Wayne made his decision. He walked away. He sold his 10% stake back to Jobs and Wozniak for $800. He later received another $1,500 payment as a final settlement. Total received for 10% of Apple, $2,300. Now here is where the story gets truly painful. Because Ron Wayne didn't just miss Apple's success, he watched it happen, in real time. In 1980, Apple went public. Ron's 10% would have been worth $22 million that day. By 1990, it would have been worth hundreds of millions. By 2000, when the iPod changed everything, billions. By 2007, when the iPhone launched, tens of billions. And today in 2026, Ron Wayne's 10% of Apple would be worth over $400 billion. More money than the entire GDP of most countries. And Ron Wayne? He lives in Pahrump, Nevada, a small town of 40,000 people, in a modest house. He collects rare stamps and coins as a hobby. He worked various jobs over the years. He never became wealthy. And here is the most unbelievable part of this entire story. When asked if he regrets selling his Apple stake, Ron Wayne says no. He says he made the right decision with the information he had at the time. He says he would probably do the same thing again. Because in 1976, nobody knew Apple would become Apple, not even Steve Jobs. And that is exactly what makes Ron Wayne's story so important. He wasn't stupid, he wasn't lazy, he was experienced, careful, rational. He looked at the situation and made what seemed like a perfectly logical decision. Protect yourself, avoid the risk, walk away safely. The very qualities that make someone a responsible adult in normal life. destroyed the greatest financial opportunity of the 20th century. Think about that for a second. His caution, his wisdom, his life experience was the exact thing that cost him $400 billion. While 21-year-old Steve Jobs, who had nothing to lose, who was reckless and obsessive and refused to accept failure, changed the world. History doesn't always reward the careful ones. Sometimes it rewards the ones who are just too young and too stubborn to know when to quit. Ron Wayne knew when to quit. That knowledge cost him everything. Ron Wayne is 91 years old today. He still gives occasional interviews. He still talks about those early days at Apple, and he still insists he has no regrets. Maybe that's true, or maybe after 50 years of watching Apple from a distance, he has simply made peace with the decision. Because what else can you do? You can't go back. You can't unsign a document from 1976. All you can do is live with the choices you made, with the information you had, at the time you had it. Ron Wayne made a decision worth $400 billion in 12 days. James Howells made a decision worth $750 million in 3 seconds. And somewhere right now, someone watching this video is sitting on their own accidental billion. They just don't know it yet. My name is Ryan Cole. This was Accidental Billions. Next week, we're talking about the man who was offered 50% of Google and laughed. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you next week.